It is Saturday, April the 19th, and tomorrow is Resurrection Sunday. You know, I've made some wonderful sacrifices during Lent. And tomorrow, Easter Sunday, I'm actually hosting a brunch at my home that I'm looking forward to it. And whether it's Ramadan, whatever you call it, this has been a very special time in our lives around the world. And welcome to our Saturday edition. I have a question for my guests, Louis Martinez and C.J. Jordan, and that is Letitia James going to jail? Will she resign? Looks like the tables may have turned on New York's activist Attorney General. And for those of you that are not familiar with the question, well, this week, the Fair Housing Finance Agency sent a criminal referral letter to the Department of Justice alleging that the New York State Attorney General committed mortgage fraud by what? Falsifying certain records in order to obtain favorable loans. Oh, the irony. In the allegedly false documents, she named a Virginia residence as her primary residence, CJ and Louis. However, her primary residence must be in New York in order for her to have actually run for Attorney General in the first place. She also allegedly claimed a New York property as a 4-unit structure instead of 5. And why? So that she could get a better interest rate on her loan. And guess what else? Listed her father as her husband. I mean, you can't make this up. Now, have the tables turned? If these allegations hold even the slightest bit of water, Louis and CJ, Pam Bondi will no doubt be relentless. I mean, the political prosecutor will be prosecuted herself. Now that would be something else. I mean, have chickens come home to roost for Letitia James? The story of New York State Attorney General may soon go down as the greatest tale of irony ever told. Louis, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that, yes, the tables have turned. I think that the criminal referral comes at a time when Republicans in general and their trifecta in Washington, D.C. needs a little bit of oxygen from all the criticism it's received through what we've seen, the chaos of the tariffs. So my first impression as well, if there was something illegally done, and the law needs to be upheld. Of course, the motivations come also into question of why this criminal referral is coming now and why they went and they took a deep dive into Letitia James. I would be worried if the lesson that we're going to learn from the past 4 years and the beginning of this Trump administration is to then just perpetuate the weaponization of the judicial system. But at the same time, this is a political system and a political process, and we do know that the Trump administration, in tandem with Congress, will need something to sell to all those MAGA supporters.
Let me stop you. Let me just stop you flat. The New York State Attorney accused Trump of the very same thing that she's now being accused of. When she campaigned for governor and attorney general, her entire message was, I sued Trump. Now the same may soon happen to her because she was doing the same thing. Hypocrisy. A pound of flesh, remember Merchants of Venice, which Trump now demands, it is his, and will he have it, CJ? I mean, it is clearly, this is what she pursued him for.
I think he's got her. it's like a boxing match. It's like WWE. He's punching back. Even if someone says, oh, she didn't break the law, she broke election law. So I foresee a complaint going to the election commission because she falsified her ballot. And so her petitions. So she is not a resident of Virginia. Her father is clearly not her husband. That's the same thing like Ilhan Omar marrying her brother for him to stay in the United States. No, that is an act of fraud. So there's two things we're going to look at. One, the financial documents, and then two, the election law that will be applied to her in this particular case.
CJ, are you on Blue Origin?
Well, you know, when you invited me on, because
kidding.
there's lies, leakers, and lies and leakers.
I thought for a minute you were on Blue Origin. It's all good. It's all in fun. But listen, this was unexpected, Louis and CJ. The UK Supreme Court ruled, of all places, that trans women are not women. Wow. Under the UK Equality Act, transgender groups fought for trans women to be allowed in locker rooms, homeless shelters, and more even if they were born a different sex. Okay? These are places where men dressed as women obviously shouldn't be, but they want to be there for the same reason. They need to so badly that they sued to be there. And for the highest court in a country like the UK, which literally, guys, imprisons people for misgendering others, this may set a major precedent in other nations to finally fight back against this nonsense. Louis.
Well, I think in general, we have been seeing a pushback internationally, or I guess a change of winds when it comes to all these progressive ideas in Europe. We see it in Italy, in Germany, in the Netherlands, and now in the UK. Obviously, Hungary has always been like a castle for conservative ideas in Europe, but now it's catching on. And we're seeing it as well here in Latin America with Bukele, Milei, and other heads of state. Ecuador just reelected a right-wing president. So I think that they're done with the experiment of the progressive ideas of the past 15, 20 years, and now the Supreme Court of the United States setting the record straight going forward. So I think it's a clear signal to the population of the UK, and even now we have Keir Starmer, who is a Labour Prime Minister. But if we look at his policies, he's leading the country in a way more conservative way than the Labour Party has been doing for the past 20 years. So my reading of that decision by the UK Supreme Court, it's just what we're seeing in the democratic political process worldwide, where the pendulum is swinging and the processes and the levers are working. So at one point in the past, the Supreme Court might have ruled differently, and now, new representatives in Parliament, new Prime Minister in the office, and now new decision coming from the Supreme Court, and we're seeing it as well here in the United States.
CJ, I got to tell you this, okay? Donald Trump's Internal Revenue Service Commissioner may soon make a determination that will rock the world of elite universities. Reports are circulating from sources inside of the Trump administration that the IRS is planning on rescinding, CJ, the tax-exempt status of Harvard and potentially other major universities. And they're also planning to bring a halt to foreign students, international students, attending that university. Now, Harvard, no doubt, will cry and argue and sue. But here's the reality. Should we have sympathy for Harvard? They have an endowment over $53 billion. None of that is taxed. And tack that on to the hundreds of buildings and assets which they own that aren't taxed. And here's the reality. These schools are blurring the line between for-profit and not-for-profit, and their top officials get paid this ludicrous amount of money. And listen, the school, if it were a country, would be richer than 120 countries around the world. Why should they get a
If,
tax break in the first place?
Well, if our HBCUs had a fifth of what they had, we would be whole. But when you think about it, it is a reason why President Trump has gone after USAID to shut it down. Because USAID was funding some of these different programs that these universities had. It is a privilege to come to the United States and to attend any university. At my HBCU, St. Paul's College, we had students from different places in Africa that came, but this is a different environment. You cannot come here to our country, our home, and then all of a sudden want to cause chaos. You want to, come after the Jewish population. You want to destroy property. That's not allowed. And he has the right to say, wait a minute, we're going to have some conditions. We're going to start vetting. I mean, why should we pay universities and they're going to comfort and cozy up to people who actually support terrorists?
What about,
it makes no sense
what
to
about
me.
the banning international students? Is that going too far?
I think he's absolutely right.
Really?
No, it's not going too far. No, it is absolutely not.
All international students are not the same.
They're not the same. I think they need to be actually vetted more. And once they are vetted, then sure, they should provide a list to the State Department of here's these students, international students, and we should vet what are they doing back in their home country. I mean, the students that I went to school with that came in from Africa, we knew who they were. They weren't out there, tearing down our HBCUs. They weren't doing all of these things. But now this is a different environment. We actually are having students that supported Osama bin Laden, that supports Hamas, that supports North Korea, supports ISIS. It has to stop. And like I said, it is a privilege to be in our institutions.
Hold that point. We're going to come back to you and Louis. And coming up, we have our ecumenical panel. Shannon Wright is in the house. I mean, dressed fabulously, like she's going to Easter. I mean, she's sharp.
She probably is.
Oh, no,
she's
you got to see her, but I got to come back and talk to you all a little more before Miss Wright makes her grand entrance. We'll be back. Don't go away. I mean, I've always wanted to spend an Easter in the Holy Land of Israel. I've gone there over 17 times. But I was reading this report, Louis, yesterday, where Israel was developing plans to attack Iran's nuclear facilities, but they could not do it without the assistance of the United States. And then I saw this headline where the Trump team brought a halt to a possible World War III. And it's the reason why the Trump administration is negotiating now directly with Iran for them to not have any kind of nuclear capacity. But wow, with all that Israel is doing in the world, they were about to start another front of conflict, attacking the nuclear facilities and wanted the United States participation and a support? Man, what are we missing here? Louis?
Well, I think what is missing from the picture is the calculus, right? So Iran does not have nuclear weapons as of now, but used to have its axis of resistance, what it calls its axis of resistance, to maintain some form of deterrence from Israel or other enemies of Iran, with the Houthis in Yemen, with Hamas, with Hezbollah. But now we know that Hamas and Hezbollah have been decimated and their leadership has been decimated. So now there's no deterrence that Iran can offer to the region to not be attacked. And of course, now Israel, this is their time. Either they take out the nuclear capacities of Iran, or Iran is going to rush to have nuclear capacities to restore that deterrence to protect itself. That's the calculus that is missing. So, and it is a very interesting political chess. We have the United States has already positioned B-2 bombers in the Pacific that are within strike range of Iran in preparation, or even in sort of a way of signaling to Iran that if they don't come to the table, then they're going to green light an operation by Israel. So all this is ongoing, and this is not separated from the Ukraine-Russia negotiations or the China-U.S. tariff negotiations. So very, very complex environment internationally. But for Israel and Iran, it's existential. So for them, it's a very simple calculus. Israel needs to make sure that Iran doesn't reach nuclear capabilities, and Iran needs to reestablish deterrence. Otherwise, they will be no longer an active player in the Middle East.
You know, CJ, I watch Maryland U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen go to El Salvador this week thinking that he was going to meet with Garcia and have a conversation, at least a phone conversation. He absolutely knew before he boarded that aircraft that he had no chance of not only seeing Garcia, but having a conversation with him. It was political grandstanding. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Well, here's the thing. President Trump is playing what I call Texas Hold'em whack-a-mole with his strategy. He's keeping everybody on their feet. Chris Van Hollen, the senator, as we know, we probably as taxpayers gave him the courtesy to use a military aircraft to go there. I don't think he flew private. I could be wrong. But
well, in other words, he didn't pay for it out of his wallet. I think you're right.
No, he did not.
Oh, we agree on that. That's what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
Right. And so the fact that he thought that he, as a U.S. senator, using taxpayers' money, was going to go and demand a sovereign nation to see an illegal alien. The key word is not a U.S. citizen, because they might have granted that to make sure he was well. This gentleman is not a U.S. citizen. He is a citizen of El Salvador.
You're missing something here. Clearly, you saw the president of El Salvador sitting in the White House with our president, Donald Trump, when he clearly said he was not going to return him. So obviously, he and Trump are on the same page. What makes you think that he had any chance of changing the narrative?
He didn't have a chance to change the narrative because there was nothing that stated or lined up for him to be able to do what he did other than political grandstanding, as you stated. I mean, again, after he went there and what I consider acted a fool, because that's what he did, because this was not a United States citizen. It was an illegal alien. Attorney General Bondi released the name of the gentleman that he used as a gangbanger. The people had known him in the streets. The next thing she released was the protection order where he had abused the wife, i.e. the current wife, who went probably on taxpayer dollars down there with the U.S. senator to demand the release of an illegal alien.
Well, wait a minute. The Biden-Harris had him on their radar in 2022, November, for the fact that they thought he was involved in human trafficking. Okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But
so this is a political theater. Theater.
Let me, Aideen just reminded me that you're innocent until proven guilty. Thank you, Aideen. Now, back to my panel. Louis, let's talk about real voter ID, because I know there's some places in America where people think they have all the time in the world. They knew this real voter ID was coming up. You got to have those little stars or that little flag in the corner of your driver's license. And if you don't have it, remind them what's going to happen come in early May. What happens? And they're not changing the deadline.
No, you won't be able to get into a federal building, much less fly on an airplane.
That's the part. Fly on an airplane and get into a federal building. That is very significant if they don't change the goalposts. But listen, it doesn't mean you cannot still drive in the United States, because this was really put in place for illegals, to make sure they could drive, to make sure they're legal, to make sure they could vote. All of a sudden, the trajectory is changing, Louis.
Well, I think it's funny that people are now complaining about new requirements for public safety, but there was a large contingent of the population that was okay putting face masks and passports to go into stores and everything. And now we're aware that nearly 12 million illegal aliens entered the country in the past 4 years. We're aware that a vast number of them had criminal records. Some were even in the terrorist watch list. So the fact that the government is actually pursuing simple tools to improve public safety, improve the integrity of the election system. It shouldn't surprise us, shouldn't be troublesome. We have to uphold the rule of law. And of course, there are certain requirements and requisites.
I think we've exhausted this topic. There's one thing I want to wrap this up before we bring our faith panel on. President Donald Trump said this week the termination of Fed Chair Jerome Powell could not come fast enough because he, along with the central bank, should have lowered interest rates some time ago. Does this bother you, Louis?
It does.
Does anything Donald Trump does bother either of you? I'm just curious.
Of course. There's a lot of things that Donald Trump does that bother me.
Well, tell me why this bothers you, though.
Why does it bother me? Well, because I think it's politicized. He can't bend the will of the Federal Reserve to the political ideas of the president. And there is also a stipulation for the mandate that Jerome Powell has and the time that he has in that position. Yes, of course, Jerome Powell has made comments, and the Fed has made decisions that contradict certain economists, and especially those who agree with the president. And this week, the comments that Jerome Powell made on the impacts that tariffs could potentially have on the U.S. economy were a step too far and almost influencing what markets would do by making such a comment. But I'm not troubled when I don't agree with what President Trump is doing, which is quite often actually, is because I have complete faith in the democratic process and democratic system here in the United States that it will always balance itself out. There's always the will of the people that will be the law of the land one way or the other, through the president, through Congress, or through the Supreme Court.
Before I say goodbye and bring on Pastor Shannon Wright, Holly Swenson, and Pastor David Scarlett, is there anything the president does, CJ, that bothers you? Now, I know some people say, Armstrong, is there anything he does bothers you? Yeah, I write about it in the Baltimore Sun all the time. Go ahead, CJ. Anything?
Right now, nothing, because currently, in order to bring the people to the table.
Wait. Did you say nothing?
Nope.
Ooh.
Absolutely.
Ooh.
Right now, nothing, because
Woo-hoo.
because his character and personality of a New Yorker, in order to bring not just the United States, but bring the world together to force them to the table to deal with China, is important. Does he have a right to criticize Jerome Powell? Yes, he does.
CJ, let me stop you a minute. There's so much I agree with what Donald Trump is doing, but to say that nothing he's done bothers you causes concern for me. With anybody, they're imperfect and can do things better. I mean, come on. You're such a credible person. You're a good human being. There's got to be something that Donald Trump has done that bothers you. Come on now.
At the moment, for this particular administration, what I see coming out, there's nothing that bothers me. No, okay. What would I have liked to have seen?
Okay.
Would I have liked to have seen a more measured approach when they went through doing DOGE and how that was executed and implemented? But I do understand why it was done that way.
No,
so that he could get things moving.
Don't criticize and then try to make up for the criticism. You were concerned about how he handled DOGE. It's okay to be constructive.
Yes.
A constructive critic. It's okay.
Yes.
We cannot be enablers of anybody.
I would have loved for it. I would have loved to be able to see that power start out with the secretaries.
Thank you. I'm going to leave it there because I know I'm not going to get much more out of you, but I thank you for that because that leads us into prayer now because we got the ecumenical side coming on to join us, and I wanted to put it on the right place, the right spirit to lead into these men and women of the cloth that are joining us. CJ, happy Resurrection Weekend. Louis, the same to you. Thank you, and pray for this world, and please pray for our president, Donald Trump.
Amen.
I pray for him every day.
Wisdom and compassion. Pray for that, and we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Author of Stop, Drop, and Grow. She joins us, and Pastor Shannon Wright, former mayoral candidate in Baltimore and former NAACP leader, joins us. Let me start with you, Ms. Swenson, and thank you for joining us. Talk about what Easter personally means to you at this point in your life, and how can the message of resurrection be applied beyond theology and leadership and family and daily life?
Sure. Thank you so very much for having me. For me, Easter really is that, it's the season of hope, new life, new beginnings, and it is a principal holiday of Christianity. And I think it's just that time of rebirth and renewal, and so moving from the darkness of winter to the light of spring. And I think if you're a person of faith, Easter marks the resurrection of Jesus 3 days after his death by crucifixion. And so, when we're talking about, renewal, I think, renewal is by definition replacing or repairing something that's worn out, run down, or broken. And I think many people in this day and age can relate to feeling those things. And I think Easter is an opportunity to do a spiritual cleanse and really make time to connect on a deeper level.
Now, is that background with all those books, because I'm a reader of books and I love libraries, is that real? Oh, it's not. Okay, AD told me no, so don't answer. Leave it alone. I should have known better. I just got excited. Let me ask you, Dr. Wright, in a world increasingly secular, how can Easter's message still resonate widely, and how do you view the relationship between personal sacrifice and personal growth?
I think the idea for folks to be able to grasp Easter better is that we all make mistakes, but Easter is that time to be able to recognize, respect, and honor that most supreme sacrifice that gives us the ability for rebirth and renewal and second chances. So if we don't recognize and respect that gift from God to have Easter, to have all of those things that happened, we wouldn't have grace, we wouldn't have mercy, we wouldn't have the ability to have second chances, confess our sins, and move forward. So Easter is that time where everyone, regardless of who you are and what you are, needs to recognize that even though we're not the only faith, between the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, we have more in common than that separates us. And this is that time where we're supposed to show respect for that ultimate sacrifice and reap the gift of that ultimate sacrifice and pay that forward in sharing the gospel.
What do you think is the greatest modern misunderstanding today about Easter?
Bunnies and eggs, jelly beans, those things. They have nothing to do with the resurrection. I understand the folklore of the rabbits and all the eggs signifying rebirth, and I get that. And we're using that rebirth in a folklore kind of way to be able to exemplify and explain the rebirth of Jesus Christ. But I feel like God said it the right way the first time. So I think if we focus on what the true meaning of Easter is, as opposed to what the pagan or worldly estimation and comparison to the Easter eggs and bunnies, we get lost when we go there.
You know, let me go back to you, Holly. Why don't you explain to our audience what Passover means? Why this resurrection weekend from Friday until Sunday? Why it's just so celebrated around the world, and the meaning of it?
Sure. You know, I think this holy time really it's an opportunity to practice that religious observance and go a little bit deeper. You know, if you look at, historically, I mean, for Christianity, Easter is that joyful end to Lenten, which is the 40-day period of prayer, fasting, and repentance, and it begins on Ash Wednesday. So it's that opportunity to really go, I think, just a little bit deeper than what you experience in everyday life the rest of the year. I mean, you should be inviting that spirituality into your life, I think, on a daily basis. But this is an opportunity to really appreciate, what Easter means. And you have things like Good Friday, Palm Sunday, and then I think really just Easter is representing the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. I mean, you're coming full circle, and it's a beautiful story of renewal and rebirth.
Why, I'm gonna stay with you, why is humility and forgiveness so important?
Well, the reality is when you don't forgive somebody, that's a weight you carry. When you can't make forgiveness a part of your practice in life, that is a weight you carry. I want to say that again, because I think in this world that we're living in, I think a lot of people aren't willing to forgive. And it doesn't mean you have to forget, but forgiveness is really such a important practice, because it's going to help you free yourself and live with more lightness.
Talk about the humility part.
Whew. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. That is, as a parent, I don't know that I could do that. So for each of us as individuals, it's a time to recognize the gifts that we've been given and to be humble, because we didn't earn it. Jesus did that long before any of us walking this planet were here. So we have to humble ourselves to accept the gift and to understand this gift of mercy and grace is by no means attributed to our own individual actions. It's because of the supreme sacrifice that was made long, long ago. And you have to show respect for that. Each year, one of the ways that we encourage people to do that is to plan something that you want to do with your family for your larger community family, to be able to show that rebirth and that renewal and that paying it forward in that spirit. And that has to come from humility for it to be, one, received, and two, to bring that joy and that peace and that spirit, true joy and peace of spirit, to you as the individual.
You know, Holly, I was just sitting here thinking. I think about Solomon and Gomorrah and how they started out with 50 good men, and they kept reducing it to 30, to 20, to 10, to 1. And even if we were living today and Jesus were performing these miracles and turning loaves of bread into a spectacular where you can feed thousands of people with fish and everything else. Even if we were to see all the miracles, even if we were to witness him rising again, 10 or 15 years later, we would be back at the same sin, the same circumstances, the same challenges, the same greed, the same destruction of each other. Why?
Yeah, I'm at a loss here myself because we keep witnessing history, repeat itself. We know better, but we aren't willing to rise above. And I think, I don't know if it's because humanity is forgetful, but we have been historically cruel to one another.
Let me stop. Is it that humanity is not forgetful, but humanity just doesn't want to be good? It requires too much of a sacrifice. It requires too much. It's easier, and that's why I guess we have free will. We can either accept them or we reject them, and for the most part, we reject them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I definitely think there's an element of that as well. There's no doubt. I think, it takes work, and I think it takes it's personal sacrifice to be disciplined in making time to connect, and I think, and remembering, and making a choice to live better, brighter, with more wellness, with more intentionality. And I think a lot of people maybe in this day and age aren't willing to do that. And so it is a very complicated, I think spirituality unfolds differently for everybody. But I think that, it's your level and your willingness, your spiritual willingness to make that connection and that commitment to, I think, just to connect to your own, your own center.
I say this, Pastor Wright, because during Lent, there are certainly things that I've definitely sacrificed. But for me, I do want to be good, and then I was thinking earlier, boy, Lent is over. I can go back to a few of those things that I enjoy. But then I say to myself, and what makes me make better choices is really simple. I say this: okay, if I give in to my flesh after I have that evening or that night, what do I have to show for it the next day? A week later, a month later, or years later. But if I serve God, if I do good, if I sacrifice a lesser good for a greater good, I have so much to show for it. I have so much peace. I live in such harmony. And I understand that, but I've only been able to do that because I've become older and wiser. I can realize I want to do things in my life now where I have really something to show for it.
Absolutely. It takes a long time to get to that point up here.
Yes,
where you listen to what's in here.
Yes.
And we aren't born with that. We're just not. Shaped in sin, molded in inequity. We all know the scriptures, all that. But it's, my kids and my grandkids play video games, okay? And they try to get me to play video games. So I play games with them just because I want to be able to connect. So I explain to my kids and my grandkids that Jesus is that reset button when you get an extra man in your game. But what do you have to do to get that extra man in your game? You have to practice your skills in that game. Well, to get that reset with Jesus, we have to practice the principles that we were given.
All the time.
Exactly.
Constantly.
So I break it down like a video game.
All the time. Listen, hold there. Interesting conversation. Our guest, Pastor David Scarlett, will join us when we return. Happy Resurrection Weekend. We'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Pastor David Scarlett is joining us, and I thank him for his service as a former U.S. Marine, and he's an author, all for his glory. All for his glory. You're an author, you're a U.S. Marine, and even though you've read, you've studied, you know the way, we welcome you to the broadcast. How hard is it for you, even with all that you know, serving God and honoring his commandments?
First of all, Armstrong, thank you for having me. It's very difficult. It's a walk, and our walk has trials and tribulations. I learned that the hard way, being a Marine and rising the corporate ladder, then dying and going to heaven. He had a different plan for me. He wanted me to come back and start a ministry called By His Name, His Glory. And it's a process. We walk through that process. It's like Marine Corps boot camp. We go through phases in our walk with him, but those phases gives us the perseverance and the strength and builds our faith to know he's got it every step of the way.
Tell me about that Lion of Judah in the background.
He is Jesus. We represent Jesus this week as the wonderful Holy Week that he died on the cross, and a victory on Resurrection Sunday. But he's coming back. He was the Lamb of God the first time. He's coming back as the Lion of the tribe of Judah the second time. People are asking for justice all over the world, and his justice will come when he comes back. And until then, we have to reach the billion-soul harvest and do things for his purpose and his glory. Just like Isaiah said, "Here I am, Lord, use me for such a time as this."
So, Holly, I'm going to switch up this conversation a little. Share with people how they can be good. Make it long-term, not short-term, how they can make better choices, how they not can give into the flesh or give into pride or give into their ego or self-righteousness or not give into lying and cheating and stealing. What can you give them to deploy that can help them through these rough waters of life?
I think, something that I advocate for a lot is, parenting and wellness. And I think when we're talking about something like spirituality, where you need to lean on going a little bit deeper, there's 3 practices that I find to be very powerful, and that is meditation, prayer, and journaling. Those are things that most people can access, pretty easily. And so I think, as you're going through these trials and tribulations, they just really allow you to feel more connected and more comforted. And I think they cultivate more awareness and also just provide you feelings of guidance. I think there are a lot of people who feel lost in this day and age. And so these practices are a way for you to really help wipe the slate clean and I think ask for forgiveness for any wrongdoings in your life. And something like journaling can help you uncover, insights and can really just be helpful to unpack and process anything that might feel heavy. So I think taking the time to turn inward really is going to help you face the outer world with more grace and feelings of just being grounded. So they're going to help you with personal growth as well as mental and spiritual wellness.
Dr. Wright, I was talking to someone who's very young, and he's 30 actually. He came to me with a business proposal and made a lot of money in the technology space, very young. I actually thought he was coming by because he's looking for an angel investor. And in the middle of the conversation, he said, I'm not really looking for an angel investor. He said, I have a lot of friends of mine who've made a lot of money, they have a lot of materialism, we do a lot of things. He said, but we found ourselves so empty. It didn't fulfill us. It was more meaningless. I felt even more isolated from the world. And then I became he's Jewish, and he decided that he wanted to become an Orthodox Jew. And so they started studying Hebrew, going to school. And he said what has worked for them is that they have so many of them, about 20 of them, and they reinforce each other. And the reinforcement is so important. And they've been doing this for about a couple of years because the money did not work for them. But all of a sudden, they found meaning in their lives. They found purpose in their lives. And I got to tell you, Holly and Pastor Scarlett, I was absolutely stunned. But they were drawn by my moral message. But he wanted to use that as a disguise to talk about something they don't talk about. They don't talk about it, they don't share, but they found meaning. That gives hope.
It does. And that's where hope comes from. You have to feel like you have a purpose. Not that you just belong, there's a little corner you can fit in, but that you have a purpose in the larger scope of things. And that's one of the things that messes with a lot of people. If you feel isolated, if you feel alone, if you feel nobody hears you or understands you. When you find that shared collective of folk that believe in that higher power and what his imprint is going to be and already planned to be on your life, You stop trying to fill those spaces with other things and just allow God to do what he has already intended to do.
You know, let me go back to David, Pastor Scarlett. How does different religions, I mean, blend, let's say, well, not religions, how do different regions around the world blend folklore and history and faith into their celebrations and understanding what the faith walk is, Pastor Scarlett?
Yeah, each one has a different belief system. That's one thing that we love to celebrate, the life of Christ. You know, you have Judaism, Islam, and Christianity know who Jesus is. In Islam, it's Isa. He is a prophet. He's not the Son of God. But we know in Christianity, he is the Son of God. He is the second of the Godhead. And in Judaism, they're still looking for that Messiah. So there's lots of pieces to that. And it's for us as pastors and believers in Christ to put those pieces together for people to understand who truly is this Christ that we're celebrating, this Resurrection Sunday, that he beat death. He's the only one. Every religion under the sun, they have a prophet or somebody they looked up to, but never was rose again with witnesses like we do with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
What are the obstacles, Holly, if it's only happiness that you're pursuing in life and not joy, a peace, a understanding?
Well, I really believe in taking a holistic approach to life. And I think, something I talk about in my book is taking care of your mind, body, spirit, and your environment. And I think most people aren't hitting all of those in their life. And so for me, something that I advocate for is really trying to cultivate and spark more joy, right? Joy, happiness. I mean, there's a lot of layers to being human. And I think one of the best ways to make contact with that is to practice self-care. And that's something that I will talk about, ad nauseum, because I believe that when you take care of yourself, when you tend to who you are, and you're willing to go inward and get quiet, it brings you a lot of wisdom that you can then carry out into the world. And so, if we're talking about, joy, that's something that you have to cultivate. You're not going to find that outside of yourself. You have to learn to really live it on the inside and make time to make connection and contact with those things that bring you joy in life. And that looks different for everybody.
Dr. Wright, in my own life, and I think sometimes you can be the best example, there's some things that we do very well. It doesn't matter to me what people think. Because you get caught up in what people think about you, because people remember your past 20, 30 years ago, they still judge you by it. They have no idea where you are with your walk today. So what people think about you and what they judge you by is of very little relevance with me. And also, I am blessed, I'm not around toxic people. Now, it's so important, because if you're around toxic people, you're gonna become toxic. And I'm not driven by fear. Talk about those things. People are so concerned about what other people think about them, how they judge them. They feel they cannot get out of toxic situations, and they're driven by fear.
So, I will say this, fear is not a bad thing. Now, I know that it says in the Bible, fear is not of God, but hear me on this.
So you're saying fear and faith can exist?
Yes, as long as your fear, your ultimate fear, is of failing to live up to God's expectations. See, fear of disappointing God and what he expects should be a fear that we have in our lives and cause us to live our lives accordingly. So fear is out there, it's in the world, it's around all of us. But take that fear, focus it on helping you to move in the correct direction. Use that fear as a tool to say, okay, God, you are the ultimate Father. I wouldn't want to embarrass or upset my earthly parents. So you as the Father, I don't want to disappoint you. So use that fear of disappointment to motivate and encourage you to move forward in a positive way.
What about the past or the future and the state of the world that we find ourselves in? David, Because it is so true. We're living in a time with what is right is wrong and what is wrong is right. We're seeing things that we never thought possible before, things that people are doing. How do you navigate that? How do you share wisdom on how people operate and live in the kind of world that we find ourselves in today? And I don't think, personally, it's going to get any better. I don't think we've seen anything yet, actually.
Well, biblically, you're correct. That's why the Bible is so important to be the guidepost of our heart. We know we're living in biblical times. We know we're living in the days. We're in the church of Laodicea, neither hot nor cold. It's lukewarm. Everything goes. And so those are the signs that Christ talked about in Matthew, so that we're aware. And the best thing that we can do is show that love for him, fulfill the Great Commission, and to bring the gospel from east to west and north to south, because there's little time left. And you're absolutely right, Armstrong. It's going to get a lot worse. We know it. And we know in the book of Revelation what happens. But you know what? Revelation 22, we know our King of Kings and Lord of Hosts comes back as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and we get to rule and reign with him. So it's worth everything we put our heart and soul into.
Holly, I'm going to probably be the last word with you. We give so much of ourselves to other people with their problems, their circumstances, their drama. But why is it so important that we find time to work on our own needs and our own challenges that we find within ourselves?
Because when you can learn to activate that goodness within you, you're going to spark it out in the world. And so for me, the work I'm doing, I really felt called to service to write this book to help people step into really thriving as parents and not just surviving. I think there's a lot of people in survival mode, and I think it's super important to live that truth out into the world. And it's, for me, writing this book, it's led to opportunities like this, getting to connect with so many amazing people who are doing deep work in the world. And I think it's about living your truth and being as kind and as humble and as willing to participate in bettering this place that we call Earth. And I think there's a lot of layers to what that looks like, and it's going to unravel a little differently for each person. But for me, living in service has been one of the biggest blessings.
Well, I want people to go out and get your book. I love the name of it. Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow. And also the same with David, Scarlett, All for His Glory. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Like I said, happy Resurrection Weekend from us here at WJLA 24/7. And make the most of life, because it's short and it's fleeting. I'm Armstrong Williams. Thank you.